So as you know, we have an institution where we have courses. They are all online. Our company has always have been online. So it was not something like post-COVID.
Sure.
It was always like that. That's how I designed it. That's how I like to work. So we have this company where we have courses. So we produce lots, thousands of contents for social media. So I am always on Instagram doing stories and doing videos and doing lives. And I have the commitments of the classes with the students because our classes, they are live. They are not live. They are recorded. So, but sometimes we start to re-recording some classes, changing things. So it's a job that we do like 7 days a week. So every day we are working.
Sounds like me.
Yeah. So every day we like, especially on the weekends where we have lives and people are more active. Our students, our followers, they're more active. So that's when we like to produce more content. But every day we have at least posts twice a day.
That's great.
So it's an immense production of contents to ABA, applied to autism. And we have our post-graduation, the classes that you were recording are part of them, are part of it, the post-graduation. And this is where I would like to start with you, like our system is totally different. I don't know if you know a little of Brazil.
Not much.
Yes. When you start to tell me how is your system, I will tell you how is ours. So you will see how different it is. So how our educational system, not just like we are a third world country, but we have more access to education than the US, I think, because our cost of education is really, really smaller compared to the US. So lots of people here, they have access to graduation. They have
That's great.
Lots of scholarships, like their level could be not so good, so not be so prepared to be a profession, but they have access, they get their degrees. So, for example, it's not uncommon here to have an assistant therapist like your RBT, the RBT of our field, being being a psychologist or an SLP or someone from education.
Wow.
So the idea of having someone with with just high school attending kids, it's really something that not gets inside people's heads so easy.
Sure.
Because we have lots of people who has degrees. So we have these kinds of professionals here. So it's like, we don't need to go to someone who does not have an education, or we can have some student who is a grad student who is doing a graduation and starts working, being an RBT. Here we call therapist, assistant therapist.
Okay.
Here we have this name. So it's not uncommon. So if you want to add something, you can be free.
No, I think you're spot on, right? So the cost of higher education here in the United States is very strange. So I grew up in Pennsylvania. That's the state that I grew up in. And
today you are in Virginia.
Yes. Yeah, I live in Virginia now. I'm a professor at James Madison University, and I got my undergraduate degree at a small state school in Pennsylvania named Shippensburg University. I got a degree in history because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I knew I was good at that. And I like to do research, which is now benefiting me greatly now.
Yeah.
Um, but it was very affordable because it was a small state school. It was within the state that I grew up in. So I was a resident of Pennsylvania, and that made the tuition much less than if I had traveled out of state. But after I graduated there, I worked for a few years doing like construction. I had a very kind of alternative path to what I'm doing now. Like I had no real, I don't know if it was interest, but didn't have any experience working with individuals with disabilities at all. Like that just wasn't in my experience, my learning history, right? I didn't have anything that made me want to do this work. But I went and then I moved to Utah. So I moved out to Salt Lake City, Utah, because I like snowboarding. I like the mountains, and Utah's great for that.
In far away from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, very,
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 like, not,
yeah. It is. I think it took me 2.5 days to drive there, like with stopping and things like that. So it's pretty far away. It was like 2 time zones away, I think. And I didn't know anyone out there. I didn't know anyone in Utah. I just knew that I wanted to move to Utah and go back to school. And I went to school to be a PE teacher, a phys ed teacher, because I liked sports, I liked kids, and I liked the idea of having summers off, right? As a teacher, I was like, this is going to be great. But the cost for me to attend a university in a different state in Utah was very high. So it's called out of state tuition, and that makes it more expensive for some reason. I don't really know the justification for that, but
just one question. You always have to pay all the year of tuition. In many universities, I always see that like you have the tuition, because here we pay everything, we pay monthly. We don't have this yearly way of paying things.
Yeah, so for me, we paid by the semester. So if it was the fall semester, I would pay for the fall semester at the start of at the beginning of that semester, and then for the spring semester, it would be the same thing. I'd pay it at the beginning to get through it. So I didn't have to pay for the entire year, but for half of the year, essentially. But it's extremely expensive if you go out of state, out of your home state, to get your education. Because depending on the state too, they have different regulations. That's what makes it very confusing, I think, sometimes for all of us here in the States that are deciding on where to go.
Even for you guys.
Yeah.
You go and see, how is it on each state?
Yeah, and how much does it cost? How much is the cost of living, which varies greatly from state to state. But I wanted to go, so I did it, and I had to take out loans. I didn't have any scholarships. I was a first generation college student from my family, the first to graduate in my family. So while my family was very supportive of me going to college, as far as being able to kind of guide me through some of the, I don't know, funding opportunities and things like that, that didn't exist for me. So I had to kind of figure those things out. And it wasn't really until my Ph.D. program until I figured that part out. So I was saddled, and still am, with a lot of debt from my undergrad or my master's program at University of Utah in Salt Lake. But I have to say that it was amazing to be out there. I loved Utah, and that's where I found my passion to work with kids with disabilities. It was a really interesting. So like I had mentioned, I got my undergrad in Pennsylvania, and then I took a couple years off because I was just a history. I just had not just a history. It's a great field, but I didn't have a teaching license or anything. So there was no work for me. So I just did construction. I built gas station canopies, the thing that you pump your gas under to keep you dry. Like I built those things for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and decided, I'm going to go out west and go back to school. But so I hadn't been in school for a while, and my professor offered extra credit for our course if we went and volunteered at this program. and the program was called UFIT. And I was like, you know what? I haven't been in school for 5-6 years. I should probably go do this just in case I'm slipping and I need to get back into the groove of being a student again. And what UFIT is it still exists, and it's at the university. And at the time, I don't know how many students are working with now, but when I was there a while, I don't even know how long ago, 2010, I think it was. So 11 years ago. They had 283 students that they brought up throughout the city up to the university, all that had what we would consider significant disabilities. So cerebral palsy, autism, intellectual disabilities, wide-ranging disabilities that were more on the significant support needs end of the spectrum, if you will. And they paired you up, so each college student with one student from the city. One kid from the city, and I got paired up with a young man. At the time, he was 10. Now he's like 21. It blows my mind. But he has autism. He's nonverbal, engages in some self-injurious behavior, some aggressive behavior. I said nonverbal. He has limited verbal capacities, so he has some words, he can communicate, but it is diminished, if you will. And so, like I mentioned, I never worked with, I knew of individuals with disabilities, but I was never involved working with anyone with a disability. But I got paired up with this kid, and we hit it off like really well. We built a really strong relationship and foundation, had great rapport with each other. And at this program, what you would do is we would do like things like dance, art. We'd go swimming in the pools at the university. And it was every Friday night for 2 hours. So as a parent, both of us are parents, right? And both of us are parents that have children that have, special, they need some extra support, right? So we can both speak to this, right? Like it's tiring, right? Like it takes a lot of work, and there's no really time to connect with your spouse or to just go to dinner or go to a movie. It doesn't exist. So those 2 hours, the parents could either drop their son or daughter off at UFIT and go to dinner or go to a movie. They could, the university put on like yoga classes and Pilates classes for free. So the parents could do that. This whole program was free. That's what made it so great. Or they could stay and hang out, which many parents opted to do, which you totally understand, right? You're putting your kid with another person that you don't know. So I got paired up with this young man. I'm doing my best not to say his name because I still talk to the family. So I'm trying to do my best. So keep that confidentiality going. But we did our thing, and it was the first day, and we were swimming. And typically, when you swim in one of these big pools, they're heavily chlorinated, so a lot of chemicals. Mm-hmm. So what do you do after you swim in one of those pools? You go take a shower. Yeah. Right. So we go to the locker room, and his dad pulls me to the side. He's like, I just want you to know that when our son takes a shower in a public facility, right, like a university or a public pool, he'll take his swim trunks off. So he'll be completely nude. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I understand that. Like, that's fine. That's what you do. And after years of doing my work now, it's like, oh, what he's doing is he was generalizing his showering behavior at home to showering at different settings, right? So it made total sense. But his dad was like, I'm going to come with you to the shower just to keep it above, above board. And I was like, yeah, like, please do. Mm-hmm. So what happened is we're in the shower, and he was able to clean himself, right? Okay. So he's showering, and we're just kind of making sure he doesn't elope or run away or fall or get hurt or something like that. So what happens is he decides to use the bathroom while showering. Okay. And not urinating, right? And I looked at his dad, and his dad turned white as a bed sheet, right? Like, he was embarrassed. And I looked at him and I said, this is the second best place this could happen. The first being in the toilet, right? But, he had no clothes on. We were in a shower. There's water. We have custodians to come help us clean it up. So we got it cleaned up, got him cleaned up, and got him dried off, got him dressed, and they went home. and everything was fine. And so that program lasted, oh man, I think it was like 8 weeks we did that. And you work with the same kid every week.
Okay.
And at the end of the program, his mother and father asked me if I'd be willing to work for them, right? Coming in and doing similar things like you mentioned, the women that you have working with your son. That's what I was doing there. So I would go in, and I had no experience in this at all. So I was learning as I was going.
Process.
But yeah, so I agreed to work with them. I switched from being a phys ed major to getting my master's in special education, because I was like, I love doing this. And I found out after I worked with them for a while that they were so worried that I was going to not come back because he used the restroom in the shower. And I was like, I understand that, but that doesn't scare me. Like, clearly we can work on that, right? But like, that wasn't going to run me off. Like, I wasn't going anywhere. And so through them, I ended up meeting other families with kids with autism, more significant support, needing more significant support, and started working with them. And so as I was doing that, I'm getting instruction from some amazing folks at the University of Utah. So Robert O'Neill, Leanne Hawken, who was Dr. Leanne Hawken, Dr. Rob O'Neill. They were, Dr. Hawken was my advisor for my master's program. And so everything I was learning there, I was able to implement with the kids that I was working with. Yeah. And it was just really great. And I did that for about 3 years until I graduated with my master's and my teaching license to be a teacher for kids with disabilities. So that was kind of how I got introduced to it.
So
and then after, oh yeah, go ahead.
Just for me and everybody to understand, you did like when you got out from high school, you went to do history
Yes.
as a bachelor degree.
Correct.
And you stayed for, it was like a 3-year course, something like that.
It was 4 years.
4
Yep, 4 years for my undergrad, for my bachelor's degree. Yeah.
Okay. And then you went to Utah, where you were, it was a master.
Yeah.
So it was first you thought about psycho ed.
Yeah, physical education.
Physical education. And you change it, you switch it to special ed.
Yeah.
And when you do a master, you also already get your teacher's license.
Well, I did not have my teacher's license before that. So a typical master's program in the States takes about 2 years.
Okay.
But because I needed to get my teaching license, I had to go for a 3rd year because I had to go do my student teaching and do my internship, essentially. So that's why it turned into a 3-year program for me out in Utah.
You had to do some classes and hours.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Exactly.
Okay. And the masters in special ed, you already had ABA stuff inside, or no?
So many of the, let's see how I want to word this. Many of the top programs in the United States that are for special education are built on the principles of applied behavior analysis.
Yeah.
Now, not all, but most really sought after programs are. Now, they don't always explicitly say this is ABA, but looking back at my training, I'm like, that was all based in ABA. That was all based on the theories of ABA for the most part. So like during my master's program, and now I can speak to some undergraduate programs in education because that's what I do. I prepare future special education teachers as well. Everything that I teach, and I'm also a behavior analyst, but everything that I teach is based in those philosophies of ABA. So if it's in academic instruction, so reading, math, whatever it might be, it's all about explicit instruction or direct instruction, providing models, prompts, checks, providing feedback, using reinforcement, all of those principles that we all use regardless if we're doing direct trial teaching or if we're doing assessments or anything. We're using all of these procedures. And then if it's classroom behavior management, if you're using high quality classroom behavior management strategies, that's all grounded in applied behavior analysis to some degree.
Okay.
And so I didn't have any formal training in ABA during my master's program. But like I mentioned, many of the principles that I was learning at the time were applied behavior analytic.
So in order to be a teacher, and this depends state by state, right?
Yeah.
You need to have license in each state.
Yeah, you do. So in order to be a teacher, regardless if it's special ed or general education, so it doesn't matter. You still have to be licensed, and each state has their own approach to licensure, different requirements, different courses that you've had to have taken. Most university coursework fulfill those requirements. So there's a lot of reciprocation between states. So you can go from one state to another and take your license with you and just apply and pay the fee, because it's a lot of money involved. And typically you just sign up, they review your transcripts and all of that from your education preparation program, and you'll get your license in the new state. Some states will say, oh, hey, well, we wanted you to have this course on, I don't know, like trauma-informed care or something. So you might have to take that course somewhere. And once that's done, then you can get your license. So it really is a state-by-state sort of thing, but it's not that challenging to navigate.
And you always, when you have a master's, for example, on ABA and ABA, because of the hours of the BCBA test. But for example, in teaching, you will also need to have hours of experience supervised by someone. Is like, this is something that is common in the US for the profession.
Yeah, and it's really not now, although it is a bit different, but it's not all that different from accruing your hours to sit for the exam to become a BCBA. So to become a teacher, you go out and you go into schools and you do these over several different experiences. You kind of start out just observing and watching and helping out a little bit to where finally you take over the classroom and you're the lead teacher. And then you'll have a supervisor at your university who is assigned to you that comes out and evaluates you. Now, it's not as rigorous, I think might be a good word, as the supervision requirements, because you can get X many hours per month, and then you have to have so many supervision hours. It's not necessarily like that for teaching licensing. They'll come out maybe 4 to 6 times in a semester to provide feedback to you. So similar approaches, but different requirements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So after you finished it, you were out of the University of Utah. It's that name? Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
And you were with a master degree in special education and a teacher license.
Yeah, so after that, I moved to Colorado. And I moved to the top of the Rockies in Colorado. So the Rocky Mountain Range, I lived up on the top of the Rockies, and I was a special education teacher in a middle school resource classroom. And I worked with kids with a wide range of disabilities, mostly specific learning disabilities and kids with emotional behavior disorders, some students with autism. But one of the main barriers to learning for my students was the vast majority of those students were English language learners. So they spoke Spanish. That was their home language. Many of the homes, their home life, it was strictly Spanish speaking.
So they were all immigrants.
Yeah. So where we lived in Colorado, we lived by Vail ski resorts. So it's one of the largest conglomerates of ski resorts in the United States, and actually out international too, because they have stakes in some other international ski resorts too. So in that area, that kind of niche area that I was living in, we had these super wealthy people, right, that had these amazing homes and could afford all the nice homes and cars and things like that. And then you had the rest of us, right? We had teachers, and then we had the individuals who would work at the ski lifts, and then at night they would go work at the restaurants or at the hotels and things like that. And many of the families of the students that I worked with, I can only speak to the students' parents that I worked with, did that, right? They would work a day job, then they would work a night job for not great pay, especially for
school?
Yes, public school.
Okay.
Yep. So many individuals would come up that were immigrants. They would come up from Denver because Denver was about an hour and a half worth of a drive to come up to there. And then they lived up in what we called the Vail Valley. Okay. So my predominant population were English language learners. And it was a really great experience for me to work with.
A little Spanish?
I tried. It's very rusty now. I could probably get a taxi and not get ripped off, and I could probably order a drink somewhere, but that's about it now. But we used to do things where, I would be trying to teach them words and skills and things like that. So then they would try to teach me phrases in Spanish. We would talk about sports. Their favorite sport was soccer. I like American football. So I started to learn about soccer. I still don't know a lot about soccer, but, trying to really connect with them. And it was a really, really great experience for me and hopefully for them. I had students that were embarrassed, I guess would be the right way to say it, about their English. Mm-hmm. And I would tell them, I'm like, you have no idea the skill set that you have to be able to speak English and Spanish. Like, you have no idea how lucky you are for that. And so they became very comfortable speaking Spanish or English with me. But in some of their other classes, they were still a little hesitant. So I would go there and talk with their teachers, and then they would start speaking English, and the teacher would be like, oh my gosh, they can. I'm like, yeah, they just need to feel welcome and, not embarrassed. You have to support them and reinforce them for doing that.
Secure environment for them, to be able to make mistakes. And sometimes if you don't understand, you just say to repeat and try to each other to connect. When I was in the US, I studied English since I was 8 years old. So I had always liked English. I don't know, because of the movies and series and all the Hollywood American scenario. Mm-hmm. So, but when I was in the US, in some places that we were not Florida, because Florida is everything. Okay, we went to Florida, New York, Ohio. Mm-hmm. So we went far away by car, and in some places, and all by car. So in some places, I won't remember where, but my husband will. I felt like people, they don't want to understand you. So even if you speak English, I speak English, people usually can understand me, but I have an accent. Of course, I'm not an American, and I don't speak English every day. So my listening, I have a better skills in listening than in speaking, mm-hmm. and better than writing, because I don't write. I write emails for you guys, or with someone that I speak, I need to write, but I don't speak everyday English, but I listen every day, because every day I am listening. So I'm watching something on Netflix or mm-hmm. Amazon Prime. So am
I every day.
But I'm not practicing. So mm-hmm. when you feel you are not understood, it sometimes it's bad. Depends on the person. My husband, he doesn't have, he always say, oh, I am here, I am legal, I am doing nothing wrong. I am paying for everything. So
Mhm.
I don't need to be ashamed of. But my husband, like, he's an exception because he communicates with everybody, even
Mhm.
if he doesn't speak English very well. So
Mhm.
his English is not so good, but he communicates in somehow. And he always say that when people wants to understand you, they will make a way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But when you don't, so when I arrived in somewhere, like, even to order a food, and it was not some like big shop, or like, it was not even at Starbucks. Sometimes people, they don't have the patience to understand you. Okay, blah, 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 and sometimes they speak so fast and
Mhm.
so like, because it has the accents in each state.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I was gonna get there. Yeah.
if you're not used to that, you say, uh, what? So I was in some situations that I felt insecure, and
Mhm.
sometimes you feel less. So I totally get all of the kids, but you cannot do that with yourself, because if you
Yeah.
guys come to Brazil and try to ask something in Portuguese, or if you need something, you will be like in a difficult spot also.
Yeah. Well, so I've traveled a little bit. So I was in Peru for a month and a half once,
Oh,
and so I got to see some amazing stuff that they were doing, working with kids with disabilities there. And like I said, I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not much. But so I went down. I went down with some individuals from Utah that I was in school with, but I went down a week ahead of time by myself,
okay.
and then I stayed for a week after everybody left. And so I was staying in hostels, and then for about 2 weeks, I think it was, or 3 weeks, I stayed with the family that was down there, and we would sit around the dinner table, and I would do my best to like we would just talk and talk and talk, and
Yeah.
but I also understand what you're saying, that sometimes when you're trying to um, communicate and people don't understand you, and everyone that I met down there was fantastic in
Yeah.
talking with me and being patient with me, but it can get either frustrating or
Yeah.
embarrassing, where
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get over here. I can't communicate that. I've been to France and Germany, and same thing. And I don't speak a lick of, I don't speak any German. I speak a
Yeah.
tiny bit of French, and that was years ago. And it's the same thing. You're trying to find out where, like, where's the Louvre? Where's this thing? Where's that thing? And it can be very challenging, but that's also, I find, very exhilarating too, to immerse myself in other cultures. And I feel like if you haven't had those experiences as an American, like if you haven't gone out and experienced other cultures, then you are less tolerant, which is not acceptable. And you're less patient, which is again not acceptable. And depending on where you're at in the US, certain areas are more accepting of others than other states, which again is not okay. So it
Yeah,
is,
but that's life. Like, it's normal.
it
Like,
is.
yes, like, we need to uh we don't have control for other people, but
Right.
we have from ourselves. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to work on that. So I tried to work on that. Like, I remember once I was at Starbucks and I was in my credit card. It went something wrong with the credit card. And because of traveling, and sometimes
Yeah.
we lock for security issues,
Yep.
and I had money, but I think it was $100, because we were using so much credit card, and we let the money, like, for emergencies or
Yeah.
situations that we were traveling for like almost a month with two kids. So we were all organized, and then I went to buy with 100, and they didn't accept either. Oh, we don't
Oh, you're right.
accept
Yeah.
because the value is too high.
Yeah, they don't have enough change in their
Yeah,
register to, yeah.
I stayed so frustrated. I had a tantrum in the car, and I
Yeah.
started crying.
That is not a you specific story. That's happened to me. Like when you only have like a large denomination of a bill and your credit card for some reason isn't working, you're like, here, and they're like, no, we don't accept a 20. How do you not accept a 20? But
Even at 20, oh my God.
Yeah.
But now
But
I know we started to get used it, because when you just land, like when we arrived, it was on our flight was from it was Fort Lauderdale.
mhm.
And when you arrive there, is everything okay? Because Florida and everybody speaks Spanglish.
Yes.
Is everything okay and nice? But when you go like going New York, and after New York, when we were going to Ohio,
Yeah.
so Missouri, Illinois, so
Hmm.
you start to feeling things different, and
Yeah.
you don't see lots of Brazilians. We slept in Nashville.
Oh, nice.
We traveled lots of cities
Hmm.
and by car. So you are the road and you go to a gas station.
Yeah.
So, but you get used it, and then you learn. So, uh,
Yeah.
at the beginning, you stay like more frustrated, but then you learn and everything. It stays fine. But this leads us to think. Imagine the kids who can't speak.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We put ourselves in their shoes, so it's so bad. So of course we will have a tantrum and be nervous and
Yeah.
cry and shout.
It makes sense.
Yes.
Right. It makes absolute sense if a student doesn't have a functional way to communicate with us, that perhaps, tantruming or other, crying or other behaviors like that will be a thing that'll show up. It's completely understandable. But I quickly found out when I was in Colorado that I couldn't afford as a teacher to live up there.
Okay.
So I was in the same boat. So I moved back to Utah, and I was a high school teacher, in a self-contained classroom. And again, worked with kids with autism,
A
SLD, ID.
self-contained, many people they don't know what it is.
Oh,
It's a special education class.
yeah.
We could call that
Yep.
only students with disabilities comes to you.
Yeah, correct. So there are several different ways that special education is done in the United States. So there's full inclusion, where students with disabilities are in the gen ed classroom all the time.
And
Then there,
they can receive some kind of help,
yes,
and they are on the full inclusion setting.
yes, yep, absolutely. They might get pulled out every once in a while to get some support with math or reading or speech, whatever their disability happens to be in, under what category, they can get pulled out for services. Then there's a resource setting. I was a resource teacher in Colorado, and students are out in a general education setting most of the day, and they will come to me for a period a day, to get some additional instruction in their gen ed coursework. So I would work really closely with the gen ed teachers there to learn what they were teaching the students in science, history, social studies, math, English language arts, and things like that. And then I would reteach things and provide additional supports and different additional skills, additional instruction. And then I would do assessments, right? See where they're reading, how they're progressing in their reading, how they're progressing in their mathematics and things like that. So that's a resource classroom. Then self-contained classrooms are still within the school that everybody's in, but the students typically stay with me the entire day. Now they'll go out to like specials, like gym class or art or things like that, but their main instruction would come from the self-contained teacher, who was myself and then a colleague of mine, Aubrey Summers. We had two self-contained classrooms, and she was the other teacher, and she's amazing, by the way. But so they would stay with either myself or with her throughout the entire day, and we provide all of their instruction.
So it was like two adults in the same class, and or she
No,
had she had her classes,
yes.
and you had your students. For example, how many students did you have?
So most of the time in my self-contained classroom, I'd have between 10 and 15 students at one time. which doesn't sound like a lot when we're thinking about like some gen ed classroom, general education classrooms in the United States can reach 40 or 45 students in a class, which is that's a lot here. But 10 or 15 students that all need individualized instruction, all need additional supports, all need data collected on them every day, is, maybe the equivalent of 40 students in your classroom. Like the work's about the same. So yeah, and I loved that job. But while I was doing that job, I started to notice some things from some of the people that I saw teaching. Now, not Aubrey, but actually no one in our building. But when I would go to professional developments, I'd hear other special education teachers kind of complaining about students or struggling to teach them things. And our school happened because Aubrey and I did some really great work. I believe we were really, really high quality teachers. Like I think we did some really good things for kids. So other schools within our school district that had students that were exhibiting very challenging behaviors, they would send them to our school. And to a point where I was like, we have no more room. Like you cannot send any more students because we don't have any additional room. Like we can't do this. We don't have any more seats. We can't do it. And I started to feel like some of the teachers there weren't trying very hard or didn't have the skill sets to support kids that had more significant support needs for behavior, basically. So I decided, what can I do to help more kids? And the only thing that I could think of doing was going to get my Ph.D. And I got my Ph.D. at Penn State in Pennsylvania. So I went back to Pennsylvania.
As Sal.
Yeah, I was with Sal. Sal was 1 year ahead of me. And that's where I met Sal. And while I was at Penn State getting my Ph.D. in special education, I took the coursework to become a behavior analyst. I finished my Ph.D. in 3 years. Typically, Ph.D. programs run 4 to 5 years. So I got done a little bit early. And I will credit Sal, some of my colleagues like Andy Markellos, but mostly my chair, my committee, JT Taylor. He was very supportive. My committee members, David Lee, Mary Catherine Sheeler, they were just incredibly supportive in helping me get these things done. But like I mentioned, while I was there, I also got the coursework completed to sit for the exam. And then I graduated and moved to Minnesota. And I was a professor up at Minnesota.
I don't know if it exists, this word, but you were a mover.
Yeah, I was. I was transient, right? I was moving around. I moved around quite a bit, and once I got to Minnesota and got settled with my family, because in the mix of that, I got married and we had our daughter, and then when we got there, I sat for the exam. I passed first go, which was great, and was up there for 2 years, and then decided to come to Virginia. To be here at James Madison because it's within 3 hours of my hometown. Okay. So, my wife's family and my family are both in Pennsylvania. So it's nice to be close to family. And now I'm here preparing special education teachers and, aspiring behavior analysts. So, and I don't want to move.
Okay. You were done.
I hope so. I hope that I can stay here. Yeah. That's the goal.
And why did you choose Virginia? It was because of the university?
Yeah, it was. So we weren't planning on leaving Minnesota. We had bought a house the year before. Like we were settled. We were happy. The university was great up there. My students were great. My kid was in a good school. Like we loved it there. It got pretty cold. But other than that, we loved it. But I just wanted to be closer to family. We both wanted to be closer to family. And I saw the job posting for James Madison, and they were looking for someone who does what we call here the general curriculum. So kids with more mild and moderate disabilities for special education. They were also looking for someone in the same job posting who was a behavior analyst that wanted to train behavior analysts. And I'm like, wow, that's me. Like that posting that was put out there, that's what I do, right? Everything that they needed is within my skill set of skills, if you will. And I was like, I talked to my wife and we had a lot of conversations about like, do we want to move again? But yeah, but ultimately decided that, being close to home, about it's really 3.5 hours, but still, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Compared to an 18-hour drive to get to Minnesota. And I came and I interviewed over the course of a couple of days, and they happily offered me the job, and I accepted, and now I'm here. And I couldn't be happier. Now, moving during a pandemic, I wouldn't advise. It was not fun.
Yeah.
I have been teaching remotely, so I haven't been on campus at all, really. So that's kind of strange. So I'm really looking forward to next year to be on campus. Yeah. But yes, I mean, it's just been great. And I just love everything that I do, because I get to just talk about behavior all day long, every day.
And your wife, is she a behavior analyst? Or
no, she is a mother, but she has nothing to do with education at all. She has a master's degree is in business and finance.
Okay.
So she is brilliant. She's smarter than I am. She works for our federal government.
Okay.
Right now currently she's working on all of these COVID loans that are happening to support small businesses. So she's worked in the banking industry. She's worked in small business development centers, helping people start their small businesses. And now she's out there. She's still working from home, but she's helping support individuals whose businesses have been shut down since last March, and they're on the verge of shutting down. So loans to help support them stay open. So she's working right now 60 hours a week.
Because lots of requests.
Yeah.
And she has to analyze and.
Yeah, she has to go through and make sure that no one's making any fraudulent claims and, all that. And that's way above my head. She, like I said, she's brilliant.
So she's good with math and
good with numbers.
Yeah. Not my thing.
The only percentages I'm good at is what I'm converting to rate.
I prefer to have a system to do that for me. I think that's safer.
That's fair, yeah.
I'm not a number girl. But let's tell people how is it usually, like, not necessarily the one that you did, but how is it a doctor program in the US? Usually, why people go to do a doctor program?
Yeah, I think people have different reasons for doing it. I don't think there's one overarching reason, and I'm speaking for a ton of people that have PhDs, so that other people might have different opinions. So like I mentioned, for me, I thought that I could help more people, right? I could help more students by putting out high quality teachers. Like, that was kind of my drive.
Because in order to teach, to be hired in the university, you will need to have a PhD.
Not necessarily. In order to get what we refer to as a tenure track job, to become a tenured professor, you have to have a PhD. There are folks out there who teach at university level courses, the same courses I teach, that have a master's degree, but the pay scale is a little bit different. The requirements for you to do these things are different. So not necessarily that, but I think some people want to be university professors, so they see a PhD as a route to do that. Other individuals have grown up in families where their parents might have a PhD, and that's what they know, right? And that's what they have aspired to do. Yeah, so there are several different paths. I think many of the people that I talk to and that are colleagues of mine and that I'm close to, came because they wanted to help more people, right? Wanted to do research and teach students how to work with kids with disabilities. And I find that to be I find that I hold myself in good company, because those are people that have the same kind of views that I do.
They see the PhD as an opportunity to learn, because that's the big issue that people in Brazil, we have really different. So in PhD, like here we call doctor programs. So just for us to understand, PhD and doctor programs, we are talking about the same thing.
Yes, here in the States. Yep.
Yes, because here here we don't use the PhD term. Just if someone do a doctoral program in the US and then they come with this degree, they are called, they put in their
Oh, I
name
see.
PhDs. But here we just say that someone has a doctoral program,
Okay.
or before his name, we will put DR
Yeah.
as a
Yep.
doctor. But
Yeah,
here,
we do that too.
okay. But here we call doctors for
Yeah.
law professionals, and med student and
Mhm.
meds and doctors, like health doctors.
Yeah, I think that's also. I mean, we call our medical professionals doctors here too, and you can have a doctor in just about anything.
Yeah,
But I think to folks outside of academia, when they think about doctor, they go right to medical, right? Like that's
yeah,
still
yeah,
it's a very common thing here too.
yeah. So here, when people go, like the purpose of a doctor program, according to our laws, the main purposes are to do research, so to make research, and also to prepare people to teach,
Yeah.
like go to the university. So most of the programs, they are not so hands-on, or even they are not so connecting theory to practice.
Hmm.
So they are not like that. So they are like in ABA, people would study more like theoretical stuffs, and you would not have a professor who has experience in autism or special education. And if you go to do a special education program, you would most of the times you would not, ABA would not be involved,
Hmm.
because like education and ABA, like here in Brazil, people are more like Piaget, Vygotsky.
Yeah, yeah.
So Skinner is not so popular. So we have like this difference in the doctor program. That's why people who wants to attend in private practices or other practices, they will not have the make do a doctor program, if not even a master's.
Yeah. So it's I really like the point you made about like this Vygotskian perspective and Piagetian perspective. So I took one of the courses that I took during my PhD program was a learning theories class. And we spent one day talking about Skinner and the rest of the course talking about Vygotsky and Piaget and folks like that. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to learn about that stuff so I could talk to people that were talking that language. But if you're not in special education or behavior analysis, any program that you take, just about any program that you take in a university has nothing to do with behavior, right? We are very separated as far as your field of study, right? So like if you're in gen ed, general education, you have one class maybe in about special education, which I find to be criminal and not okay, and we need to do better. But what that class typically turns into is a disability of the week kind of class, right? So like one week we're going to talk about autism. The next week we're going to talk about intellectual disabilities. The next week we're going to talk about emotional behavior disorders. There's no real deep learning and there's zero hands-on learning, right, when it comes to gen ed folks. Now, for special ed people, if you're in a special ed program, you get more hands-on stuff than you can imagine, right? We have students in schools all the time doing stuff. And I love to do research too. So like I'm at a university that allows me to do both things. So I get to do it as much research as I can get done and as much as I want to do. I mean, I have to do some, but like I can do more. Like I do a little bit more. So I love it. But then I also get to teach these amazing students that I work with and then get to see them doing things. And some of them help me do research. So it's just a really great a place that I've found myself at now. But yeah, it's just, but each university does stuff different too. There's no like set way that we do things here. There are certain requirements that we have to do because we have to be accredited and all that.
Okay.
But, we all do things a little bit differently.
Okay, but they have like, just to close here, on the doctor program, we have some coursework that you have to take, and you also need to do your research. But are you obligated to do a research? Like, you need to write your thesis.
Yes.
Dissertation on the doctoral.
Yeah.
But here is the opposite. Master is the opposite.
So we write our thesis in our master's program and our dissertation in our doctoral programs.
So are you obligated to do a research like on the field, or you can do a more theoretical, like a review paper?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, and I sound like a broken record. It does kind of depend
on your advisor.
Well, and on your university.
Okay.
Right. So our universities are ranked in the United States from a place called Carnegie. They do Carnegie rankings, and we have universities that are considered to be R1, which is research one, where it's a heavy research institution. Penn State happens to fall into that category. Then we have R2, research 2 universities. That's kind of where James Madison falls in. And then we have other rankings as we go down the list, because we're targeting different things. Some universities here are very interested in preparing high quality educators to go out in the field. That's awesome. Like, that's what we want. So research for them is less, not less. That's not like the right term, but it's teaching's more of the focus than research. Penn State did a great job of marrying the two, of educating and of being great educators and great professors, but also being great researchers. So really, I can just speak to Penn State and some of those R1 areas. For doctoral programs, we were required to do research. So throughout my program, the first thing that I had to do was a thing called candidacy, and I did a literature review. Then we do a thing called competency 1, and that was a literature review as well. Then our competency 2 was an applied study. So I did a single case study in a high school setting with an individual with ASD. And we were looking at, we just used a change in criterion design to improve, actually reduce behaviors using a daily behavior report card. And that's published. And then for my dissertation, I worked in a high school. I did a single case design, withdrawal design in a high school setting there, where I worked with an individual with an intellectual disability and an individual with autism to increase behaviors there. So it was very research heavy as far as the competency things, but then there was also required coursework that we had to do too. So it was a really good balance. I feel like it was really well prepared. James Madison is very similar in what our students have to do.
Okay. And now you are teaching online just because of COVID. It's not
the
program is online.
Right. Yeah. So I'm teaching online because of COVID. I'll be back in person next fall, and I can't wait.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I think that we could cover a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we certainly can talk anymore on another opportunity where
I would love to. I'd be happy to
talk more about like research and the doctor and everything people are doing there, that it's different from here, and then we can take some perspectives on all of these topics.
I would love to. I would be happy to do it. So that'd be great.
Okay, then. So we keep talking and keep spreading ABA all over.
Will do.
Bye-bye, Ben.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.